Reading a very interesting book, Bhai Vir Singh, which is edited by Lieutenant Colonel J.S.Guleria. It has many have contributed about his works and the man that he was. So I'm going to read one from Khushwant Singh. That is page 65. He talks of him as a poetic genius. So this is what it is. The last time I met Bhai Vir Singh was in Amritsar 3 months before his death. He was under the care of nurses and doctors. His bed and sitting rooms were heated by Canadian stoves, and a constant watch was kept on the temperature. The doctor had forbidden him to work or receive visitors. There were only a few exceptions to this rule, amongst them younger writers for whom Vir Singh had always a sort of personal regard. He walked into the sitting room slowly but unescorted. I touched his feet. He put his frail hand on my shoulder and asked me to sit down beside him. He inquired about my children, for he always loved children. He spoke with effort and paused for breath after each sentence and then became silent. He was never a man of too many words, and the custom of the circle around him was to sit in silence and meditate. After 10 minutes, he looked up and smiled. I knew I was expected to leave. When will you be going to the hills? I asked. He raised one hand in a gesture of resignation and answered, "Who knows?" I got up and once more touched his feet. This time he took my hands in his soft, warm hands, which had the ability to stir deep emotions and without rhyme or reason bring tears in one's eyes. "Give my love to your daughter. God bless you." I hurried out of the room. It was obvious that his time was fast running out. He did not seem concerned because to him life had meant reading and writing, and the doctor had forbidden him both. And he was of the philosophical mold who take both life and death in their stride. I left his house, but the memory of his touch lingered for a long time. Therein lay the secret of one of the dominant themes in his poem, a sensuous longing for physical contact with God in the tradition of the Vaishnava and such writers, a sort of mystic belief that the touch would evoke the angelic in man and, as a philosopher's stone, transmute dross to gold. You struck the chords, and I burst in music like a harp attuned. You forsook me, and I feel silent, and once stricken dumb, the hand had the magic touch. It makes the living come to life. The touch had a mystical significance for Vir Singh. It occurs often in his writing. From the age of 26, he became the central figure in Sikh affairs, and in a subtle way was far more powerful than the politicians and ministers who hit the headlines of newspapers every other day. This was for two reasons. He was the man who brought about a renaissance of the Punjabi language after a virtual lapse of more than 2 centuries. Vir Singh also gave a fillip to Sikh religion through his weekly journal, Khalsa Samachar, his books Guru Nanak Chamatkar, Kalgitar Chamatkar, and many tracts which were given away in millions. He told the story of the Sikh Gurus, their teachings and their achievements. His novel Sundari, Bhai Singh and Satwant Kaur, which make dull and didactic reading today, sold in thousands because they gave the Sikhs 50 years ago exactly what they wanted: an assurance of the excellence of their faith, a pride in the valor of their forefathers, and a confidence in the traditions of orthodoxy handed down by the Gurus. For the Singh Sabha movement, which espoused these cases, he was more responsible for its achievement than all the other members put together. Veer Singh's reaction to the adoration that came his way was that of a modest man and a deep-seated sense of humility. He was the one man who answered Gita's definition of the Vidya Vinay Sampann, a great humility which comes in great learning. As people clamored to see him and hear him speak, he became less and less visible. He never appeared at public functions. He never made a speech. He never allowed anyone to photograph him. Not one of his many books carried his name on its jacket, and he had written more than any Indian, dead or alive. His complete works would be bulkier than the entire set of Encyclopedia Britannica. It represents over 60 years of uninterrupted writing of 6 to 8 hours a day. The sense of humility never left him and appears like a refrain in many of his verses. The achievement is never that of the human being, but that of the maker who is his instrument of expression. Sometimes this sense becomes that of being used, or in the effeminate, masochistic extreme of being misused for a divine purpose. Thou didst pluck and tear me from the branch, held me, breathed the fragrance, and cast me away, thus discarded, trodden underfoot, and mingled with the dust, as I remember, and with gratitude is the memory of the touch. The first time I saw him at a public meeting was at a Kavi Sammelan in Sargodha, where he sat obscurely mixed up with the people. The young boy had recited a stirring ballad which had moved Veer Singh, and he had asked to meet him. The news went round that round the 20,000 audience that Veer Singh was among them. They clamoured for his darshan because all had read or heard of him. Very few had seen him. He was almost dragged to the microphone on the platform. Roars of Sat Sri Akal lasting a good 15 minutes greeted him. All he could do was to fold his hands and mumble, Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Whichever way he turned, thousands of heads bowed to touch the ground like a field of corn bending to the breeze. No Sikh since the Sikh Gurus could have known or worshipped the way it was offered to Veer Singh. No one deserved it more. Veer Singh did not look, live or behave like a conventional saint. He was not lean or ascetic in appearance. He was of medium height, of stocky build, and with a long flowing beard. He dressed well and lived like an upper class bourgeoisie in a large house with a larger garden. He was married and had 2 daughters. He kept an excellent table. He was a strict vegetarian and a great stickler for cleanliness. All fruit and vegetables were regularly washed in potassium permanganate before it was cooked or consumed in his house. He had a great love for his garden and grew exotic strains of citrus, grapefruit and Malta oranges. His favorite flower was the narcissus, which bloomed in profusion in beds about his window. He was not indifferent to money. His poems fetched larger royalties than those of any other poet. Both he and his scholarly brother had a dominant voice in the affairs of our bank. It was only after the conferment of doctorates from universities, nomination to the Punjab Council, the Sahitya Academy Award for Mera Saiya Jio, and the Padma Vibhushan that the other people got to hear of him. That was not surprising, for although he was not narrow in his outlook and had close associations with the innumerable Hindus and a lifelong friendship with a Muslim doctor, Sikhs and Sikh religion were his only preoccupation. The dominant impression that Veer Singh left on his visitors was one of gentleness. He spoke softly, and what he said had the soothing quality of a salve. Here again there was the mysterious something which he attributed to the Gurus in his writings and possessed in good measure himself. As a cloud, there are some lines here. As a cloud ambling along for a moment tarries, to cast a cool shadow on the parched earth and send a welcome shower. Vir Singh has gone, but in his case, it certainly is the casting of a worn out clothes and donning new ones. Even while he lived, people knew him only through his writings, which will live forever. Whenever the Punjabi language is spoken, there will Vir Singh's name be spoken to. And whenever the Sikhs begin to doubt their faith, there will be Vir Singh's spirit to inspire them and beckon them to the fold. So that's by Vir Singh. So humble. So here is his photograph here, as you see. Padam Bhushan. There. And it's Teja Singh has written a poem by the name of The Sweet Bard, which I'll read later.